Welcome everyone to your Thursday night Dynasty live stream. I'm your host Bryce Frazier. I'm joined by Dan the Man, Demo. How are we doing, Demo?
Good. We're doing all right today, man. How are you?
I'm pretty good. If you're tuning in, we've obviously been gone for 2 weeks. I think a couple of weeks ago, you were sick. You came down with some illness, and then I had my child this past Friday, so I was in the hospital on Thursday. So we missed a couple of weeks, but luckily not too much is going on in the NFL world, so it's easy for us to catch up and talk about some things. And luckily, the topic we're talking about today, we got a little bit more time for some free agency stuff to happen. So it gave us a little bit more content to talk about today. So anything exciting for you these past 2 weeks while we're gone? Go on. Any big trades or anything like that in your dynasty leagues?
No big trades right now. Everyone's just kind of eyeing up and getting ready for the draft. So we're posturing a little bit for draft positions. I kind of mentioned to you a little earlier. I want to move. I got a couple of late firsts in a couple of my drafts, and as of now, they don't look very exciting. Might be some running backs or maybe some second tier, wide receivers. But I really want, something in the top 2 or 3 picks. So I'm trying to angle and trying to make some trades to get into those spots right now. So I'm getting some feedback. I think some of the leagues are starting to wake up a little bit now that the draft's coming around. So we're getting some discussions. We'll see if I can move up in the drafts a little bit. The late rounds just don't look too exciting for me right now.
Yeah, I actually had one trade. I almost forgot to mention it. I remembered it as I was asking you, and I made a trade in a league. I guess I'll get your thoughts on it. Again, this is a league I'm really, really deep in, and I've already mentioned a lot of my players to you, but I basically sent out a message. Hey, I'm looking for like a top player, like a top 3 at their respected position, willing to send over a package for them. And I didn't tell them this, but I was willing to overpay. And I'm not sure if this is overpay or not. I think it's like somewhat even value. If not, I got a decent deal on it. So I sent over Calvin Ridley, Jameson Williams, a guy I know you're a big fan of, and the 10th pick this upcoming draft for Ja'Marr Chase. So what are your thoughts on that trade?
I'll say straight up, I like the Chase side by a little bit, but it really kind of depends on the other team. If depends on how many starters you guys have, and if there's a lot of depth there needs, it might be doable. I think Chase is really in a good spot. He's going to be stuck with Burrow for foreseeable future, and some of the alpha wide receivers. The thing is, I think he's kind of near his ceiling. So if you're looking for any growth or any increase on his value, I think it's hard to find. On the other side, I think there's a little bit of room to grow with Ridley and Jameson Williams, and if they could really hit on that 10th round pick, they can recover a little bit of value. It's if I was a Chase owner, I'd hesitate a little bit, but I probably have to hit decline just because it's a little too risky. Maybe if the pick was a little earlier, maybe after the draft, if we see like, hey, I can land something pretty good on the 10th position, might be reasonable.
I was pretty happy because it's like that was the offer I sent, and he kind of accepted it. I always kind of send over an offer. I wouldn't be surprised. I wouldn't like mind maybe if they added a little more.
Yeah.
So and it kind of helps his team out because he lacks depth. So it not only gives him 2 starters, 2 potential starters with Jameson Williams and Calvin Ridley, and then that pick. But it gives him that youth in Jameson Williams in the pick, and then it also gives him a veteran presence because. Even though it seems like Calvin Ridley hasn't been in the league long, which he really hasn't, he is older because he came out, I think, when he was like 23 or 24 years old. So he's 29 now, I think. He and Amari Cooper are the same age. They played at Alabama together, or they didn't play at Alabama together, but they both played there. So that just gives you like Amari Cooper came out really young. Calvin Ridley, I think, transferred from a JUCO school and came out late. So he is an older guy, but. In fantasy football nowadays, I feel like you're seeing a lot of teams go from first to worst, just like the real NFL. And it seems like this guy's team could be in that situation where, if Calvin Ridley comes out and puts up the 1,400 plus that he said he's going to put up with Trevor Lawrence, it could end up being good for both of us because it gives me a stud starter for the next, for the foreseeable future.
Yeah, I like it. I mean, there's definitely room for Ridley and Jameson to kind of hit near or into that top 12 wide receiver finish for next year. And hey, in our draft last year, the 10th pick went to Garrett Wilson. So if you were looking at something like a Garrett Wilson, Jameson Williams, Ridley for Chase, if it ended up something like that, I'd definitely have to consider it. And I'd be like, you know what, let's let Chase go. Let's get little younger guys and see what we can do. So
yeah. I wish this year's draft had as much wide receiver depth as this last year's one, because I feel like this last year's draft that we obviously came off of had one of the best wide receiver classes when it comes to fantasy value that we're going to see for a while. Well, with that being said, let's go ahead and just jump into this week's topic. So obviously we're talking about just kind of players that have, got a change in scenery. How does it affect their, fantasy value? Especially since a lot of us dynasty guys play super flex leagues. We obviously like to talk about quarterbacks, and that's what we'll kind of start with here. So let's kind of go with the first two. Derek Carr, obviously departing from the Raiders and heading to New Orleans. And then we got Jimmy G leaving the Niners and probably going to be the starter for the Raiders this year. So I guess let's start with Derek Carr. Does this change Derek Carr's value for you going to the Raiders to the Saints?
I think it adds a little bit. I think we have a little higher ceiling, a little bit, just because I think the Raiders' offense has kind of been up and down through the years, and we've seen kind of what Carr's been able to accomplish. He's never really kind of hit that 30-point threshold in a lot of leagues. He doesn't have a really high ceiling. I think there's a little opportunity with the Saints to maybe have a chance of breaking 30 a couple more times or being a little better. I don't see a much improvement, but hey, maybe that mentality of being cast away from the Raiders and just finding a new team, he might kind of rediscover himself. And I think Olave's a really great talent, probably one of the better ones he's had. So we could really see something kind of flourish there. So yeah, I think it's a slight improvement for Derek Carr. Don't see a major improvement, but I'd be happy to hold him as kind of like a low end second quarterback in like a super flex league. It's kind of where I see him. I don't know what your thoughts are on Carr.
It's hard to say someone's value increases when they go from like Devontae Adams and I guess Darren Waller, which he was he wasn't consistently healthy with, I feel like, the last couple of years. But I think Derek Carr's value stays the same. If anything, increases a little, like you just said. You're going from that to Olave, hopefully, a healthy Michael Thomas, a great back out of the backfield in Alvin Kamara. And I feel like that's one thing we haven't seen Derek Carr with is also a receiving back. So it'd be interesting to see how Alvin Kamara is utilized as a receiver because I feel like he was poorly utilized, but pretty much these past 2 seasons out of the backfield, pretty much ever since Sean Payton left. So I think Derek Carr's value stays very similar, if not increases just a hair. It definitely depends on Michael Thomas's ability to stay healthy. I think that him being healthy, and we saw it just in the 3 games last year, he had a huge impact just in that little bit that he was able to play. So I think he still got it. It's just can his toe hold up or whatever like foot injury I feel like he has every year. Because I would like to see Olave develop a little bit more, and I think Michael Thomas being on the field helps him do that. So I think Derek Carr's got like pretty high quarterback 2 upside this upcoming season. But again, I think at this point, he's kind of a transitional quarterback where he might have a job for a year or 2, and then the team might want to move on and start, rebuilding around a younger quarterback. So I think he's on a short lease with that being said as well. And then pivoting over to his replacement and Jimmy Garoppolo, I guess we have to say it's an increase in value because now he's looking like he's going to be the starter, even though there are kind of some reports that the Raiders could be interested in getting a quarterback. Like I wouldn't be surprised if they grabbed Will Levis if he fell down there to the 7th pick. But with them taking Will Levis, I could see Josh McDaniels benching him to sit behind him, learn the offense, all that stuff. Because I think Josh McDaniels is a really good offensive coordinator and a good quarterback coach. I'm not too sold on him being a good head coach yet. But it's hard to take over a team and be good the first year. Usually when you're getting signed to a team, the head coach the year before didn't leave you maybe in a good position to be successful your first year in. So I like to see some of these guys that get signed get maybe a couple years before they're kind of put on the chopping block. So I'd like to see what it looks like with Josh McDaniels with a familiar quarterback and maybe the potential to get a younger quarterback. So I will say that Jimmy G's value is obviously increased this year. I feel pretty comfortable starting him as a quarterback too. Obviously I'd much rather have him as like a guy that I put in for bye weeks or maybe potentially bad matchups if you don't have a great quarterback 2 option. So definitely increases his value, makes him a decent asset this upcoming season. But again, another transitional quarterback.
Yeah, they've signed him. I think it was to a 3-year contract, but I think a lot of the guaranteed money's in that first year, really meaning that they can get away from that contract in 1 or 2 years. And I've kind of seen a lot of these mock drafts also kind of putting Levis or Richardson, if he falls that far, some other rookie kind of behind him. there. So there is really an opportunity where Jimmy G is kind of maybe like that transition quarterback, maybe for a year, maybe half a year, really depending on how it goes for him. But hey, I'm happy for Josh McDaniels. He got a lot of his old Patriot buddies onto the team. With the wide receiver, I think they even signed
Yep.
Brian Hoyer as a backup QB now to Jimmy G. So Josh McDaniel gets to implement his system. He gets a quarterback that he's familiar with in Jimmy G. And Devontae Adams, I think he's proven himself to be a really good wide receiver no matter what. He ages really well. He's done well with Stidham in that short stint that he had. He did well with Carr. He's been awesome with Aaron Rodgers. I kind of expect the same kind of production from Adams out of with Jimmy G. And with Jimmy G there, he may be the second best quarterback after Aaron Rodgers. So the production continue to be there, and that should help with Jimmy G's numbers. Comparing him to Carr, I'd say I'd feel a little more comfortable with Jimmy G as my second quarterback than Derek Carr at this point, just because of the weapons and maybe the familiarity with the offense that Josh McDaniels has. I think he'll be a little better fit overall.
Yeah, and we've seen Jimmy G like have stretches of like just really, really good fantasy. Like I mean, it's been a couple of years, obviously, but I mean, he had like a streak of like 2 or 3 games with 400 plus yards or something like that. So with not as good weapons, so
Yeah.
it's going to be interesting to see him with Myers and Adams, and I don't know who they're going to have at tight end now because unfortunately Foster Moreau was diagnosed with cancer, but Josh Jacob, strong run game. It's kind of funny how like these Patriot coaches go and build their offenses similar to how the Patriots have been running their offense for a while. And that's always like, even with Tom Brady, like they've always established the run, and all these like Vrabel and now McDaniels are getting these kind of like basic quarterbacks per se, and then kind of working around that run game, and they're bringing in familiar faces from when they coached or played or anything like that. So definitely two guys whose values I think have increased so far. And then let's go talk about some of these guys that maybe kind of have homes. I guess Aaron Rodgers. He's supposed to go to the Jets. This is a very weird situation on what's going on. I'm not sure if it's like the compensation, I think, might be the main thing that the Jets and Green Bay Packers haven't agreed upon yet. I'm kind of confused on maybe who you think has the leverage here, because it seems like Aaron Rodgers doesn't want to play for anyone else. So to me, I would think if I was the Green Bay Packers, you have to trade him away, or you're going to get nothing. Like
right.
He's just going to retire and you're going to get nothing. But then again, the Jets are like kind of almost like they're like the Buccaneers from a couple of years ago, where they're just the quarterback away from being Super Bowl contenders, arguably. So they kind of need Aaron Rodgers if they want to maybe make a really nice playoff push, if not be the best team in the division. So what are your thoughts here? And if he does sign with the Jets, or get traded to the Jets, what does that do for his fantasy value in comparison to just last year?
I think it's a boost. I think because he will have his weapons there. He has the OC, Nathaniel Hackett, with the Jets. I think he'll be able to fit in pretty well. I think what they really do is really let Aaron Rodgers kind of run the offense. That's kind of what Hackett kind of did. I think he just let Rodgers do his thing. I kind of expect the same if he were to join the Jets, with a lot of those pieces, with Lazard coming over. I don't know if Cobb's coming over or not, but it really kind of shows like, hey, Aaron Rodgers wants to be in charge of that offense, kind of really run his game, run the passing game that he wants over there. So I think it is a little bit of a boost. He's never had the weapons like Garrett Wilson, maybe the new Devontae Adams for him or whatnot. But I do like the opportunity there. I like Brees as a great running back also to help complement Aaron Rodgers. So I think the Jets are ready to take off, and I think Aaron Rodgers is the perfect guy for them. I read something about the Jets are, I think, one of the teams with the longest droughts of playoff now. I think it's like over 10 years or something ridiculous.
Yeah, I think they're now some team just broke it. I think from basketball, like an NBA team just made the playoffs and broke the longest drought. So now the Jets have it.
Yeah, the Kings, the Sacramento Kings, is pretty miserable, but they're making the playoffs. So, I know Woody Johnson, also the owner of the Jets, has been in love with Aaron Rodgers. So when you're talking about that leverage thing, it is kind of two-sided, right? If the Packers don't trade him and Aaron Rodgers kind of sits there, when it times come for camp, he shows up, he's going to collect a $60 million check. Doesn't sound like Aaron Rodgers is going to want to play for the Packers. Doesn't look like the Packers really want Aaron Rodgers to play either. So, they really got to get rid of him and, get some sort of trade value, or else they're going to eat a lot of money. And same time they can hold that as their leverage for the Jets, but the Jets are also really desperate, right? We talked about their situation. They've kind of made all these moves kind of setting the house, getting all ready for Aaron Rodgers, and there's a little hesitation because Green Bay wants. I think they wanted like first pick or two of them or whatnot. So I think there's a little bit of holdup in terms of like what the package would be for Rodgers. Ultimately, I have to believe that they're going to get the deal done, and Aaron Rodgers will land with the Jets. It'll help him for whether he plays for 1 year or 2 year. I think it'll be a nice little boost compared to last year. He wasn't too bad last year, but he just didn't have as many of those high scoring games as he did. He scored a little, I think QB 13th range or so. So you can see him doing a little better as well.
Yeah, I think going to the Jets easily puts him back in the QB like as a top 12 quarterback for this upcoming fantasy season, if not like a top 6 one. Garrett Wilson, I think, is a lot better than Christian Watson, and he was making Christian Watson look really good. He's got a familiar face with Lazard, a much better. I think he's got a better running back, but I think just overall the offensive line also was much better. The defense, having a good defense helps your offense as well. So it's definitely an uptick in his value. This trade's got to be made within the next 2 weeks, if not like draft day. I mean, because it has to at that point, or again, Green Bay pretty much gets nothing unless for some reason they want to stock up on 2024 picks, which would be strange. But I couldn't remember what I was about to mention. Odell Beckham Jr. I'm really curious to see if like he's waiting for Rodgers to get signed too, because it sounds like they want to play together, because it seems like I guess they've hung out a couple of times outside of football. So I'm thinking that they're going to load Rodgers with as many weapons as they can, and the Jets are going to make a push for the NFL. And if he goes to the Jets, not only does the AFC get way better, but the AFC East arguably is probably the best division in football now, along with the AFC North, if Lamar stays and plays this upcoming season. So, and with that being said, let's go ahead and pivot over to Lamar. This situation is really interesting, and it's so funny to read about it because everyone's like, especially RG3. I don't know if he just doesn't understand like because he's like, all these teams are like wanting Brock Purdy upside, because he was making fun of the Commanders, saying that they're going to roll with Sam Howell, and that it's ridiculous that they're rolling with a guy with Brock Purdy upside when Lamar Jackson is out there. But I don't think he understands like what you're giving up to go with Lamar. So obviously in a vacuum, everyone and their mother knows Lamar is better than Sam Howell right now. So, but you're giving up 2 first-round picks, so you're giving up a ton of draft capital. Then you're giving up a ton of cap space. So like it's almost impossible to build around him. So that's what the problem is. It's not that Lamar isn't good enough to for teams to want. It's the combination of draft capital, the style of play he has is extremely dependent on him being healthy, because he's not a polished passer. If Lamar had to sit back in the pocket and throw the ball 30 to 40 times a game, he's going to look like Cam Newton did when he had to, and it wasn't very good. Like when he couldn't run the ball anymore. He's super dependent on his ability to be an elite runner, to be an elite quarterback in today's NFL. So with that being said, what is your opinion on this Lamar situation? If he does stay with the Ravens, is that best for his fantasy value, or is there maybe like a landing spot that is still possible? Maybe I've heard like maybe the Colts. Yeah. Do you think that increases his value going over there, or would you rather see him stay with the Ravens?
I'd like him to stay with the Ravens. I think, I've been on Twitter a lot about all this, and there's people taking both sides of this. I'm kind of the stance of I can understand. I think I'm not with the owners necessarily, but I can understand why they don't want to give him the contract fully guaranteed, exceeding all this stuff. He's put up an MVP season and all, but again, past 2 seasons, I think he's been limited to 12, 10 games in each season. So there's a little bit of worry about is his style of play sustainable, and how long does it go? Like you said, we've seen quarterbacks like Cam Newton, they run and they're able to do that, but when they're really put in the spot to be a pocket passer, it's a little more difficult. We haven't really seen that from Lamar at this stage. Arguably it might be because of the offensive scheme when it was under Greg Roman. Maybe he didn't have the wide receiver targets. I do like that. The reason I think he would do better with the Ravens and the Colts, I haven't really looked too much at the Colts, but I do like with Todd Monken coming in as the offensive coach for the Ravens. He's a really good, brilliant mind, kind of really develops the offense around the type of players that he has. in Georgia when he was leading the college team. Their wide receivers got injured. He kind of really focused on the tight ends. The tight ends really took off. I could see him do the same here. And here we already know that Mark Andrews has been really established. He does really well. He's going to be the top pass catcher. Again, Odell Beckham Jr. is another name that's been mentioned, and they have an offer out to him. I don't think he's accepted, probably maybe for the same reason you're talking about. I think Odell wants to weigh his options. But because there's a little bit of a familiarity with the team itself, I think that Lamar would probably thrive or do a little better with Baltimore. They know the type of player he is. They know the personality. They know what he's capable of, not capable of, that they can kind of continue forming the offense around them. I think there will be a little, there's always going to be a little bit of bad blood just based off of all their negotiations. But everything I've seen from Lamar seems like he's a pretty good professional. If he were to end up in a situation where he has to play, he'll play his best. He's not going to just, wing it or whatever. So, it's tough to say. I have to think again that Lamar, just maybe him and the Ravens will kind of meet in the middle. They'll find some amount of guaranteed money that works out for both of them, that works, and they can move along. The cap space is an issue. The main reason that the Ravens can't really make a lot of moves is because they're hamstrung by the fact that they're trying to figure out what to do with Lamar, right? How much of the cap space is he taking up? If it takes up too much, can we sign other players? So it's in kind of both of their best interest to get it done soon. I'd like to see Lamar continue with the Ravens and see if he can, if the newly shaped offense has him still running, but maybe limiting it and finding a good balance for him to really do well.
Yeah, I think if Lamar was a free agent, he'd have no problem finding a new home. It's the 2 first-round picks attached with that franchise, that non-exclusive franchise tag is what's basically keeping him to where he's probably going to have to play for the Ravens or hold out. I honestly don't see any other options that a team is willing to. I don't think a team's willing to risk that much money and draft capital. I think it's either one or the other. So that's what it's going to end up coming down to for them. So
in fantasy terms, I'll say this though. I mean, there's 2 schools of thought, because I've been drafting a lot of, or I've been trading for and trying to get a lot of Trevor Lawrence, actually, just because I like the pocket passer. It doesn't seem like he runs a little bit, but not going to get too many injuries, and looks like he'll have a long career. He may not have quite the ceiling that maybe Lamar had, like in those really good seasons, or he doesn't have the Justin Fields type of ceiling that he has with the running quarterbacks. So that's one of the risks or options that you guys as dynasty owners take. Do you want a quarterback that can kind of last a long time, or are you willing to take a chance on one of these running quarterbacks that might give you a spike 3-4 year period where they really do well? So if he lands back in Baltimore, I can kind of see, hey, look to see if you can get Lamar for a couple years. He might have another one of those MVP seasons where he's doing really well running and being able to throw the ball. But it's all up to the dynasty owners and how you guys want to manage your team. So
yeah, you pretty much have to. I kind of value those type of quarterbacks, the Fields, the Hurts, the Lamars, like similar to like the top end running backs, because it seems like their careers are just as long. And their value is got that short, really, really high window. So, if you need to completely rebuild and you've got Lamar Jackson, like trading for some early first or because I had somebody offer me the Lamar Jackson for the 101, and my team is in no way, shape, or form going to compete this year. So I had to say, like, and it doesn't make sense for me to do that, because by the time my team's ready to compete, Lamar might be doing what RG3's doing now and being a commentator, which I don't think he's probably best for that. But it's just, you have to treat them like their value in fantasy or, their NFL careers are shorter. And it's just how it is. Like the way they play the game is, is more brutal on their body. So that's all the quarterbacks we're going to talk about. If we got some time, we might maybe touch on some more at the end, but let's pivot over to the running backs. I feel like the running backs were extremely boring this offseason. I don't know if you'd agree. I was really excited to see, Josh Jacobs and Saquon Barkley potentially shake up the market. But it seems like this happens every year. Like, we don't really see a lot of movement at the running back position unless it's like a trade. It seems like free agents, they're always like re-signing with their teams. So we had Miles Sanders, I would argue, is probably the biggest running back name to change teams this year, and he went over to the Panthers. What are your thoughts on that when it comes to his value? Because he's obviously moving from a really, really high touchdown upside team, but he is now going to be utilized more as a 3-down back, and you don't have to worry about you're probably not going to have to worry about the quarterback maybe being a touchdown vulture unless for some reason Carolina takes Anthony Richardson in at pick 10, the first overall pick. But, and when they get inside the 5 or 10 yard line, I feel like if you had Miles Sanders, you're like, I bet it's going to be Jalen Hurts. And I feel like half the time you were probably right. So what are your thoughts on Jalen Hurts' fantasy value going from the Eagles to the Panthers?
Oh, I really like it for Miles Sanders. I was a big fan of him out of Penn State. I knew he didn't get as much carries because he was sitting behind Saquon and Penn. And then even now, when he did his 4 years with the Eagles, he had a pretty productive first 2 years, just kind of almost as a 3-down back. But once Gainwell came into the picture and what the offense wanted to do was kind of spread the ball out, make him more of a running back by committee, he kind of lost some of the work. And as you mentioned with Hurts, I like it a lot for the Carolina Panthers because I think he will kind of take on this 3-down role. We've seen him catch passes, I think about 50 or so during his first and second years with the Eagles, and that's when they had the Deuce Staley as their running back coach. I remember reading back then what Deuce Staley really wanted was he said, "Hey, let's unleash Miles Sanders, no restrictions, let him go," because he's had a good yard per carry average. He averages over 5. They've never just gave him the bell cow role, I think, just because of the way the Eagles ran their offense. If the Panthers are willing to commit, and I think they are, I think he'll do much better than he did with the Eagles the past couple of years, being able to catch those passes and also not having that quarterback being able to vulture a lot of his touchdowns. Granted, their offense probably isn't as high powered as the Eagles, but because of the fact that I think Sanders will be able to get some of those red zone carries to get those touchdowns, I think it'll keep his value about the same or even better. And he's a little older now; he's 26. And he signed a 4-year contract. I like him a lot. I think it's a great landing spot. We've seen even Dante Foreman shine behind that offensive line as well. So I'm looking forward to it. And, he's one of the little older running backs, not outside of his rookie contract, that I'm really excited about this year.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned, Deontay Foreman and Chuba Hubbard both were pretty productive on and usually you're not really seeing that, especially like when both of those guys aren't really don't have a lot of PPR value on a bad team. I feel like those guys produce pretty well, which is kind of uncommon. So I think Miles Sanders is much better than both of those running backs. So he's easily getting the 3. They've announced that he's getting the 3-down role. I also think it increases his value. There were just too many mouths to feed in Philadelphia, and when they got inside the 5 or 10 yard line, you didn't really get your hopes up too much that it was going to be him scoring the touchdown. Like Boston Scott was coming in, Kenneth Gainwell was coming in. Where now it's probably just going to be Miles Sanders every time they're within that, and he's going to get a shot. So. And with them, they're gonna start a rookie quarterback. They pretty much made that perfectly clear. They're gonna probably rely on the run game to take some pressure off of them. They've got some veteran wide receivers. I like what Carolina has done to try and surround the rookie quarterback with some veteran presence. They're going to establish a solid run game before they're able to probably invest the draft capital to get younger wide receivers around them. Carolina does still have a 2nd-round pick. I feel like a lot of people don't know that because they had 2 of them. One they got for Christian McCaffrey. So they gave up their later 2nd-round pick this upcoming year, along with the other picks, obviously for what I'm assuming is going to be CJ Stroud. So they still have a 2nd-round pick, and there could be some decent wide receivers to fall in that area of this upcoming draft. So it'd be interesting to see if they do take wide receiver at that pick to, kind of mold them around a good guy, Adam Thielen, who's grinded out a solid career in the NFL, and DJ Chark Jr., who's, kind of that speedy down the field wide receiver. So they're surrounding their young quarterback around with a lot of talent. And I think Miles Sanders is going to be the focal point of that offense this upcoming season, which could potentially, I think he's got top 10 upside based on maybe the volume that I think we're projecting getting this upcoming season. So I really like the change in value for him as well.
Yeah, I definitely a guy wear on him either in terms of like too much. He doesn't look like he's slowed down or anything. So
yeah,
we'll see how it goes next year if he gets 200 plus carries and whatnot. So
yeah, I think he's a solid buy on contending teams. Yeah. Like if you're for some reason, I don't know why you would, but if you have like an early 2nd-round pick and you're a contender still, or maybe trades you made later or early in the season, and one of your picks ended up being like a 2nd-round pick off of a team that didn't do very well, I would easily try and trade that for Miles Sanders if you could, and you might end up getting it depending on who's there in the draft and what other people might if I was a team that I had no hope on competing, and I had Miles Sanders and I didn't think his value would increase anymore, and a guy like, say Zay Flowers or Jordan Addison's there, I might be willing to part with a 26-year-old running back to hopefully stash a potentially solid young wide receiver. So, and I think Miles Sanders gives you 2 years of really good value.
Yeah, I agree with that. Yeah.
Yeah, so these next names are a little more boring, but Damien Harris, this one kind of hurt a little bit because I was a big fan of Damien Harris. Signed with the Buffalo Bills. This one makes a lot of sense. It's just I don't know how Buffalo is going to utilize Damien Harris. Is he going to be the backup running back where they're going to showcase James Cook this upcoming season, or are they just strictly using James Cook as like a similar role to James White, and Damien Harris is like the LeGarrette Blount? What are your thoughts on these guys? Both of these guys, I guess. How does it affect both of them, since it is a player coming over there? I guess I'll go real quick because I hand it off to you first. Well, I think Damien Harris's value, I guess it has to increase, right? Because, I mean, if he stayed with New England, I think he's the clear backup to Ramondre Stevenson. As an avid Patriot fan, Ramondre Stevenson has been given way more chances than any other Patriot running back in the past. He has fumbled and has come back in the next drive. I've not seen that in years of watching New England. It seems like if you fumble or if you're a freaking late to a meeting, you get benched the rest of the next game. So Ramondre's got so many chances, and I think that's just like it attests to how much Belichick and the offense, whoever else, the offensive coordinator liked him. He was in the amount of touches he got this last season. So I think Damien Harris's usage would have been very minimal for New England, where now he goes to Buffalo, who obviously has a higher touchdown upside. And he is a brute running back in comparison, in contrast to James Cook, who is more of like a slender, finessed running back. So let me ask you this. Would you feel comfortable with Damien Harris as like maybe a flex option this upcoming season? Or do you think he's maybe a guy you stream during your bye weeks?
Yeah, for me, I think he improves his value, but for me, he's more of a streamer. He's right outside that flex. Maybe as a desperate, if my team looked like got hit by some injuries, I'll plug him into the flex. It's just because I'm not sure about what that breakdown of work will look like. It sounded like, and it's a lot of coach off-season coach speak. They want to expand the role for James Cook. We saw him have a pretty limited role last year. I think they're going to expand his role. I think he will be kind of more the pass catching back. I think they were trying to get Nyheim Hines in there just because I think they wanted to make a run last year, and they just picked up Nyheim Hines to kind of do the pass catching while James Cook was kind of catching up and figuring out how to play at the pro level. We'll see if he really develops and is able to carve out a little bigger role than he did last year in terms of James Cook. So I'm a little higher on James Cook this year. Kind of seeing, with the Bills being high powered, a good offense as well. I do like the touchdown upside for Damien Harris. He's a little bigger guy than Devin Singletary. I think Devin Singletary is like 5'9". I think Damien Harris was maybe 5'11" or a little bigger, maybe like 10, 20 pounds bigger. And I think they want a little bruiser, someone that can do kind of like the LeGarrette Blount role that you're talking about. Mm-hmm. With Josh Allen slowly getting up there in age, he's still pretty young, but you don't want to have too much wear and tear on him either as your franchise quarterback, where he's taking a lot of those red zone carries and kind of pushing his way through. I think it's a place where they're going to let Damien Harris kind of take that role over and just take those red zone, those goal line carries to really score a lot of touchdowns. So there's some decent upside in the touchdown category for Damien Harris. But the contract, the amount of money they paid him, the idea of what they want to use for James Cook, just the fact that that's one of the bigger holes, I think, for the Buffalo Bills. They've been kind of trying to figure out what they want to do. I wouldn't be surprised if they bring in another running back, maybe a rookie running back, just to challenge and see, let the room kind of shake out for itself and see what happens. It's a little unsteady, so that's kind of why I have him a little bit outside my flex spot there.
Yeah, I worry about that because I've got James Cook in my most important league, so I'd really like to see him be featured this upcoming season. But I feel like the addition of Damien Harris tells you and I feel like Sean McDermott's that coach that he doesn't really care about stats. If he needs a first down, it's 3rd and 1. He's not going to keep the running back in there that's in there. He'll put the one that's suited best for that situation, similar to how kind of like Bill Belichick utilized his running backs as well. But nonetheless, it does increase his value, and it wouldn't surprise me for him to, if James Cook gets injured, I mean, Damien Harris immediately becomes significantly more valuable. So he's a solid little, not necessarily a handcuff because I don't necessarily believe in that, but he's like one of the more solid backup running backs I think to have on your fantasy roster this upcoming season.
I agree.
So decent little stash. Rashaad Penny. I've got a lot of thoughts on Rashaad Penny, but I'm gonna let you go first. So Rashaad Penny signed with the Eagles. Obviously, there's a hole there now at the running back position. As of now, we might not be saying that at the end of this, 3 weeks from now. Well, 3 weeks from now, we'll be technically live right before the draft. So it'll be interesting, and that'll definitely be a fun live stream for us to talk about what maybe some draft predictions or where guys are landing. But Rashaad Penny to the Eagles, do you think him first of all, do you think he walks on as the starter, or is it Kenneth Gainwell? And I guess secondly, do you see them addressing that position in the draft, or do you think they kind of just, I guess running backs have been kind of disposable. Like I feel like the past Super Bowl winners haven't really had elite running back play. So maybe the Eagles kind of like, okay, well, running back's really not that important. We have a running quarterback. Let's bolster up some stuff on defense, which really played pretty bad in the Super Bowl, or do you think they address running back and just add one of the top tier running backs in this upcoming draft with one of their 2 first-round picks?
So I think they're going to add someone else. I think from the rookie from the draft, I think Rashaad Penny is a great lottery kind of, not a lottery pick, but just a great lottery scratcher kind of chance for the Eagles. If he stays healthy, he can really thrive in that offense too. I think for the past 2 years, he's averaged in the games that he's played, he's averaged over 6 yards per carry, I think, which is kind of the highest yards per carry amongst a lot of the wide receivers or running backs. But of course, the major issue is injuries. This guy's just been hampered by nagging injuries, major injuries all through his career. Even last year, I just was out on him really early, and I was like, hey, I'm just going to draft Kenneth. It was a redraft league, but I was like, I'm going to draft Kenneth Walker in the 8th round or so. I know Rashaad Penny is going to get injured, and I'm just going to wait and sit. And that's what I did. And lo and behold, Rashaad Penny got hurt, and Kenneth Walker took off. I kind of see the same thing. It's really hard for me personally to invest in Rashaad Penny, just knowing the injury history. If you can get him really cheap onto your rosters, if someone hasn't read about what he's going to do, or if someone else is really also even more down than we are on his injury history, maybe you can pick up a really cheap. Maybe he might have a couple, 4 or 5 weeks of really, RB1 type of numbers. But for him to stay healthy through the year, that's really crossing your fingers and really hoping. Like you said, especially with the Eagles, they love packing that running back room. They still have they brought Trey Sermon in when he was waived from the 49ers. They've talked him up a little bit, but it's really hard to see Trey Sermon doing anything more than just being part of the practice squad. But it really shows you that they're willing to put anyone in the room, and they'll split up that role as necessary. Boston Scott still has a role. Even Kenneth Gainwell, Kenneth Gainwell just doesn't seem like he has the size or the ability to be like the bruiser kind of back. I think he's a little smaller, 5'9", so I think he'll retain that pass catching back role. But I do think they need someone because you can't rely on Rashaad Penny being healthy the full year. It'd be awesome if he is, ripping off huge runs, but just his play style and just his history has me really worried. So I'm kind of staying away from him. That's kind of where I stand with Rashaad Penny there.
Yeah, I think Rashaad Penny is like one of the most disappointing guys coming out of college because it seems like every time he's healthy, he is so efficient. He's really good. It's just he's never healthy. Like he's like Jordan Reed when he was playing tight end for the at the time it was the Redskins, but the Commanders team now, where it's like every time he was on the field, he was like putting up really, really good numbers. And the way Pete Carroll did run his offense, like he kind of made sure the running back got a lot of work. But I mean, Rashaad Penny finds himself now in a really good situation with the Eagles. I think I agree with you. I think that they address it with the draft. I most likely see them addressing it with it would be the 30th pick because there's only 31 picks this year in the first round with Miami Dolphins getting their stripped away. I think that we find them taking probably like a Jahmyr Gibbs in that situation, maybe one of the other running backs. I also wouldn't be surprised if they end up taking Bijan with their earliest pick. That I think that would shake up the league a lot. I think a lot of people would like that because now Bijan goes to a team that definitely. I mean, it's not like Miles Sanders wasn't being utilized. He was still getting a decent amount of touches. But if you put Bijan there, I already think he's head and shoulders better than Miles Sanders. So he not only does he have pretty good usage, but his touchdown upside is now, pretty equivalent to the highest in the NFL, along with anybody on the Chiefs or Bills. So I think Rashaad Penny is another guy that's a solid backup to keep on your team, and he'll probably have like a 3-carry, 2-touchdown week at some point this season because they just have him in the red zone when they get in there, and they just give whatever running back they have in the ball in the red zone. We saw weeks Boston Scott scoring. I think we saw 1 week with all 3 running backs scoring a rushing touchdown. So I think if they do utilize their draft capital and take a first-round running back, I think we're going to see them utilize them more than we did Miles Sanders. So
yeah. If you can get Rashaad Penny, honestly, it's kind of hard for me to trade for him. If you're able to get him as like a throw-in type of deal, and it's hard, right? Because his value is up and down because of the injury history. But if you can find some similar owner that thinks he's really low, and you can get him as a throw-in, it might be worth a shot. He might give you a nice little stretch of run where he's giving you really good production. And that's kind of what we sometimes look for in kind of that second RB position slot. So,
yeah, absolutely. I agree. And then the last running back we're going to talk about, this guy was kind of a surprise this last season. And I was honestly really surprised we didn't see him stay with the same team. Jamaal Williams finds himself in a new home. Last year with the Lions, he was extremely – I couldn't believe how much he was utilized. And I'm not sure if that's like – because I know, DeAndre Swift now, and you called him Taylor Swift, I believe the first week we did this show, obviously has an injury history where it kind of opened the door for Jamaal Williams to get a lot more touches. But it seemed like even with DeAndre Swift healthy, Jamaal Williams was the guy. And Dan Campbell ran his offense similar to what I kind of just mentioned. I fear maybe Sean McDermott might do when it comes to value of players. And when they got in the red zone, they just gave it to the back that was better between the tackles, and that was Jamaal Williams this past season. Do you see Jamaal Williams' value increasing in his new home, or do you see him coming maybe back down to earth as a backup running back?
I think a little bit of coming down a little bit. I think he's going to kind of take on that Mark Ingram role with the Saints. I think there is a little bit of that. He'll still have kind of the goal line carries, but man, he had a lot of those opportunities with the Lions. I think there was something like, 8 of Goff's receptions came down on the 1-yard line. So when you're at the 1-yard line, I didn't think they didn't have the personnel to throw when they were that close. And again, with Swift's kind of injury history, I think they were a little hesitant to give it to him. So ended up just being funneled to Jamaal, and Jamaal was just smashing it in for every, a lot of those. A lot of that was kind of, I think, just due to the circumstances of how the games played out with the Lions. He'll still have some of those opportunities, I think, with the Saints, but probably not as many. They still have Taysom Hill there, who's also pretty good in the red zone, and they utilize him as a runner. I don't know if they're going to continue doing that, but if they continue doing that, it's going to continue siphoning a little bit away from Jamaal Williams. And then Alvin Kamara, maybe there's that stretch in the beginning where, depending on how many games Kamara's suspended, maybe Jamaal Williams takes on a little bigger role. But I can see him kind of fading a little bit down the season, as they probably want to bring in Taysom Hill to do a little bit, and Alvin Kamara gets healthier. And if they have him catching passes, and Alvin Kamara is still very capable of running in between the tackles, just maybe not all the time. Maybe they don't want to use him all the time that way. So I kind of see a decrease for Jamaal Williams, just based off of not only the natural regression, I think, from the touchdown, but also the role that he's going to have with the Saints, just because of the health and the personnel of Hill and Kamara in the backfield there.
Yeah, I see Jamaal Williams' value plummeting this upcoming season as long as Alvin Kamara's on the field. If we end up seeing a suspension, I think he's got temporary value for sure as the backup running back. But I just don't see him being utilized nearly as much as more of a guy just to spell Kamara at this point. I mean, he's an older back, and he's a character for sure. It's a guy that you can't, it's a guy that's hard to dislike. So he'll get some opportunities just, I think, based on the attitude and leadership that he brings to the team. But he's not, I think the days of seeing him getting like more than 10 touches a game are definitely over. I just see him spelling Kamara, and his value is only, decent if Kamara is hurt or suspended. So, and you know what? I'm going to bring up one more running back. I didn't even think about it until we mentioned Jamaal Williams, and that's David Montgomery. Do you think David Montgomery just swoops in and has pretty much the value that Jamaal Williams had this last season?
Well, I think Susan takes more. I mean, I think David Montgomery does it all right. He can run between the tackles. He's a really sturdy guy. He can catch some patches as well. So I think he's going to do really well with the Lions, and I really like where the Lions offense is going overall with under Ben Johnson. So I think he does have a chance to do a little more than what Jamaal Williams did. And I read reports, and I don't know what to take of it, but they said that they're going to start over with DeAndre Swift. I don't know if that means that they're going to scale him back and say, okay, we're starting from zero. You know, you got to earn your role and you got to carve out a piece. Or are they saying we're going to take him back to just, let him do his pass catching role and carve it back from there, or let him increase more? It was interesting. It was interesting what they said. So I'm really going to see what happens. But because of the way that David Montgomery did so well with Chicago, the Bears like him. He's a really good locker room presence as well. I think he'll carve out a little bigger role than Jamaal Williams, because I think he's a little more talented back as well. So I like David Montgomery this year.
Yeah, I saw a report saying also Dan Campbell said he needs to be on the field. He's just too talented. Speaking about DeAndre Swift, but it's just like I feel like they were saying that last year too. So and David Montgomery, I think, is much better than Jamaal Williams. He's a tougher runner. He can do a little bit of everything. So when they get down to the 1 yard line, I don't think it changes. I think it just switches now. It's David Montgomery instead of Jamaal Williams. So that definitely hurts DeAndre Swift's value. Swift is definitely a guy I'd like to see get traded, whether it's before, during the draft or even like early in the season. I think he could do better with a change of scenery, because I just don't know if it's working with Detroit, but it gives that offense, a lot of weapons to spread out. So, but then again, DeAndre Swift does have to stay healthy, and that's something that he's got to deal with, and that's not the coach's fault. So, just a guy I thought David Montgomery is an interesting one, because I feel like he's been a decent dynasty asset, and I didn't think about his change of scenery. All right, let's pivot over to wide receivers. Let's talk about I would say these are the biggest two names. We'll start with DJ Moore, obviously being traded in the huge deal this offseason with the first overall pick. What do you see his value? Because I feel like DJ Moore's value is perceived really differently depending on who you ask. A lot of people say this is a much better situation. A lot of people say Justin Fields can't throw the ball. So what DJ Moore's value, what is does it increase going to the Bears, or would you have rather seen him not dealt and stick with, who I think is either going to be CJ Stroud or Bryce Young?
Yeah, honestly, I lived in Charlotte for a while, and I've been a big DJ Moore fan, and I've always, been watching with on the Panthers, and I was like, man, get this guy a quarterback. I think he'd be a wide receiver one. This is like 3-4 years in a row, and he's been putting up, wide receiver 2 numbers in fantasy. And initially, I was really excited. I was like, all right, finally, he's got Justin Fields. He's gonna be the alpha. He's got someone set. But the more I thought about it, I was like, the value might stay the same, just because the volume that he had in Charlotte when he was demanding the ball, and when they had some a little more competent QB, or even a QB that was willing to throw the ball, he was putting up decent numbers being a high-end wide receiver too. I can't see him getting into that wide receiver 1 range with the Bears, not only because of just maybe they have a few more weapons that they've added around there, and just the type being in a new offense. Just because of the fact that I think Fields is just a great runner, that they're going to continue using designed runs. He's just not going to have as much volume up with the Chicago Bears, that it kind of offsets it. I think, yes, the offense might be a little more efficient. He might get a few more touchdowns with the Bears, but at the same time, I think you lose out on a lot of that volume that he had with Carolina. With the Panthers, I mean, he was averaging sometimes 9. I think a couple seasons where he's averaging 10 targets a game, which is pretty good. But once he goes over to the Bears, they're spreading out the little ball a little bit more. Justin Fields is running. I see it offset, and a lot of my initial excitement is gone now. I wish him well, but I don't see him getting into that top 12 range. He'll still be maybe in that wide receiver 2 range. Really good, talented, wide receiver. But I think what we've seen of him is what we've seen of him, unfortunately.
Yeah, I think you nailed this one. I think his value pretty much stays the same. And for the exact same reasons. Volume is going to be decreased. I imagine volume is going to be decreased based on the other talent around him. I think Darnell Mooney is pretty good. I think Chase Claypool is a solid third option. I think all those guys are going to be involved. Cole Kmet is going to get, his fair share, along with Justin Fields, probably not going to be dropping back and throwing the ball 40 times.
Yeah.
Like,
look, when he was on the Panthers, he had nobody. It was always him and just a bunch of other folks. They put no one next to him. Laviska Shenault. They had Robbie Anderson.
Yeah.
Tight ends are like Tommy Tremblay. No one talented around him, and they were still throwing the ball away from him at times unless he really demanded it. And that's when those are the kind of games that you get excited about. But I don't see that kind of volume with the Bears.
Yeah.
So yeah,
I hope we're wrong. I really do.
Yeah.
Because I like DJ Moore a lot. I mean, I liked him with the Panthers. I like the way he plays. He's been loyal to a horrible situation that he's been in. And he's still been pretty good. So his touchdown upside increases. I think the Bears have a really, really high touchdown upside, and we saw that when Justin Fields was running all over the place. But again, the volume, I can't imagine it increases at all. So I think that Justin Fields is a better passer than people are giving him credit for. I mean, people don't really realize, they're like, well, he had Darnell Mooney last year and Chase Claypool. Well, Chase Claypool got traded in the middle of the year trying to learn a new offense, and Darnell Mooney was hurt over half the year, or like half the year. So the best wide receivers there was a stretch of games where he had Byron Pringle I don't even know his name, Byron Pringle and Equanimeous St. Brown as his best two options. That's not ideal for any quarterback to be successful whatsoever. So I think there's not going to be many excuses for Justin Fields this upcoming season, as long as the Bears address offensive line, which I imagine they do with their first overall pick now, or their first round pick, which is, I believe, the 9th pick. So they just got to build some offensive line and obviously rebuild that defense. And that definitely helps out, which will help out the offense, which will help DJ Moore's touchdown upside.
I'll say one last thing. If I hear about Justin Fields and DJ Moore having breakfast every day or sharing a cup of coffee every day, kind of like Stafford and Cooper Kupp did, yeah, my mind will change. I'll be like, all right, let's see what. And you see the first couple of games where he's being hyper targeted, I'll jump right back on the DJ Moore train and say, all right, let's go to the moon. But
I just don't see 10. I don't see 10 plus targets. I see more like 5 to 8 on average, rather than like 8 to 12. So, which sucks fantasy wise, but I think it's a better situation for him as a player and him as a team, which is good for him. All right. Juju Smith-Schuster, obviously he's going, I feel like Juju Smith-Schuster did kind of disappoint this last season. I feel like a lot of people invested, especially like in redraft. I'm not sure about like dynasty. I feel like I didn't see him in a lot of trades this past season, especially before the season started. But being the best wide receiver option for the Chiefs the full season, he didn't even eclipse 1,000 yards. I feel like he did kind of disappoint this past season. So obviously, I feel like it's really, really hard for anybody to say a wide receiver going from the Chiefs to any other team, their value increases. But Tyreek Hill did break that last year. I mean, he had his best year statistically when it came to receptions and yards, obviously not touchdowns. Do you think Juju Smith-Schuster could be utilized more in a Patriot offense? Obviously, his touchdown upside is not increasing. But do you think his usage this upcoming season?
I think the usage will probably increase a little bit, just because I think with the Chiefs, with Mahomes there, aside from Kelsey, he was kind of spreading out the ball a lot. Part of the reason probably why Juju didn't get over 1,000 yards. I think Juju's talent also. I think we were kind of under the false impressions when he was with Antonio Brown, putting up those 1,000+ seasons. Just really put him on the map. But he's come down quite a bit, and I honestly thought it was kind of an odd signing for the Patriots to pick up Juju. I don't know about. I mean, I can only see it from Juju based off of Twitter and kind of activity. I didn't know if he seemed like a great fit for the team. I don't know if you had any like insight in terms of what the Patriots were thinking, or what. I was honestly interested in your thoughts on what you think of Juju with the Patriots. I see him going down a little bit, but I'm not really buying into Juju as much as I used to before. Overall, I don't see him going better. I just see kind of slowly decreasing his talent, decreasing in ability, and just kind of fading away. So I thought it was interesting the Patriots picked him up.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think the Patriots are done addressing wide receiver, whether it's either Jerry Jeudy, DeAndre Hopkins, or the draft. I think Juju fits the way the Patriots run their offense. And I know they got a new offensive coordinator this upcoming season, but even when Bill O'Brien was the offensive coordinator in the past, the Patriots thrived on using the short passing game. And I think that does that benefits Juju's strengths, where he's a very good rack. Like, he's a tough runner after the catch. He's not afraid, obviously, to run through the middle of the field. As of right now, I would say his value increases solely on the fact that I think his volume would increase. I think right now, being on the Patriots, I can't imagine he gets like any less than 8 targets a game, because who else is there to throw the ball to? Kendrick Bourne, I guess. Mike Gesicki. So I'll say that his value increases, because I could see him having like an Edelman-like impact, where he's maybe not obviously high touchdown upside, but I feel like he could be like that 6 catches, 80 yards a week kind of guy. A solid flex play, a guy that you kind of feel comfortable putting in as your wide receiver too. This could change based on the draft or based on any trades that they make potentially. But even then, like, if they do get another wide receiver, he's the second. He's still the number 2 wide receiver on the team, and we've seen him flourish more as the second best option than the first. So, I'll say I thought it was a weird signing too, especially since he got the same deal as Jakobi Meyers. But I think that just the way the Patriots run their off, and Jakobi Meyers was the number 1 option. And I do think that Juju is a better athlete than Jakobi. I just really liked. I was just a fan of Jakobi because he was an undrafted free agent and worked his way into the starting lineup, which is a cool story and all. But I think that Juju is a better player. So I think, dollar for dollar, I think we got the better player, which is nice. And I think his usage will be utilized more similar to how Tyreek left, and he got a lot more targets and yards as well. So, gotcha. All right, I'll speed it up. I'm talking too much, so let's just touch on these next 2 guys. Speaking of obviously Juju replacing Jakobi Meyers, we got Jakobi Meyers now with the Raiders, and Jimmy Garoppolo, and then we also got another veteran player and Brandin Cooks moving to or getting traded. Did he get traded? Yeah, he got traded to Dallas.
Yeah.
So what are those guys' values? Did they increase with their respective new homes?
Yeah. I think Jakobi increased a little bit. I like him in the fit with Jimmy Garoppolo. I like him in the Patriots offense again. I think he has a little more prominent role here. I think Jimmy G's better than Mac Jones basically. So I think he'll have a little opportunity to do well. And I'm really hoping for pie in the skies. He does take on the Julian Edelman, Wes Welker type of role in the slot and really kind of takes off. He's probably not as fast as those guys, but there's really opportunity to catch a ton of balls if things break right for Jakobi. So I like the upside there. Still probably would run him in my flex spot if anything, and I'm kind of still trading for him actually because I do like him a little bit more. And then the other receiver that you talked about, sorry, what was that again?
Brandin Cooks to Dallas
Brandin
Cowboys.
Cooks. Yeah, he's always been a really solid receiver. I think he's going to complement CeeDee Lamb very well. We saw T.Y. Hilton kind of fill that supplemental role. I think Brandin Cooks is going to be he's a little more talented, has a little more juice left than T.Y. Hilton. But don't really see him hurting CeeDee Lamb's value. He'll be a nice second wide receiver there. And it has to be a definite increase from Houston when he was being thrown the ball from Davis Mills and the offense, and he was just not happy there. He's on a contending team this year. So, he'd be a little more motivated. Solid player, really old, kind of veteran player, so I'm not really drafting him. But one of those guys that, hey, if there's a lot of injuries, I wouldn't mind plugging him in either. So.
Yeah, I agree. I think both these guys' values increased a little bit. I think Jakobi goes from a very similar style quarterback play. I don't think either quarterback's really necessarily better than the other one as of right now with Mac Jones and Jimmy Garoppolo. But I think Jakobi Meyers finds himself in a better situation being the second best option at the receiving position with Devontae Adams, where Jakobi was probably drawing mostly white corners, every team's best corner. To where now, obviously, he's going to draw the second best corner.
Yeah.
And I think he picks apart zones really well. So I see that his value increasing significantly this upcoming season more than Brandin Cooks. But I do like Brandin Cooks' value now as well. I think if anything, it helps CeeDee Lamb, and I definitely think it helps Dak Prescott. Dak Prescott did lose Dalton Schultz this offseason, which was kind of a security blanket for him. So I'm definitely curious to see if like those targets just get shifted to the next tight end, which could be Ferguson. Wouldn't be surprised if the Cowboys address tight end in the draft. But as of right now, it looks like Ferguson steps in as the starting tight end, or does maybe those targets go to a veteran presence like Brandin Cooks, who's been a sure-handed guy that can get open. So his touchdown upside obviously increases as well, being on the high-scoring Cowboys offense. So I think both of these guys are pretty solid flex options this upcoming season. If you ask me, I probably feel a little bit better with Jakobi Meyers in my flex than Brandin Cooks, just based on age and what they've done kind of this past season. But they're not too far off, and guys that I'm glad that they found a better situation for their value. And then we'll just end it here on these three tight ends. So we'll start with Dalton Schultz, since we just talked about him leaving the Cowboys. He just went to the Texans, correct? Yeah. I couldn't even remember there. So going to have a rookie quarterback throwing to him. I think that's obvious. Do you think his value increases?
Downgrade. I think, that offense is just not going to be as good as the one under Cowboys with Dak and Kellen Moore. So definitely downgrade. He's not like Dalton Schultz was a run after the catch kind of guy. He's just a catch and fall down. So, I'm just kind of staying away from him. I'm not excited by Dalton Schultz at all.
Yeah, I agree. I kind of compare him similar to Dawson Knox, where I think he was just in a good situation rather than like a uber talented guy. He could see a decent amount of volume with the Texans really not having anyone to throw the ball to. I think Robert Woods is the best wide receiver on the team as of right now. They're probably going to address wide receiver in this upcoming draft as well. So that offense could be flipped around here soon. But unless, and I can't imagine Dalton Schultz sees much more volume than he saw with Dallas, because he was getting pretty good volume from Dak Prescott. So I agree. He is also a downgrade guy I'm looking to trade away, or just, definitely not targeting. And then Mike Gesicki, kind of hinted at him a little bit. Obviously, another Patriot tight end signing. Seems like they're signing all these tight ends that come into free agency. Obviously, they got rid of Juju Smith, who didn't work out. Hunter Henry's still there, but he was pretty much a ghost this past season outside of a couple of games. I think Mike Gesicki easily comes in as the best tight end. And I thought it was very interesting to see that he was recruited heavily by Bill O'Brien when he was the head coach of Penn State. So obviously Bill O'Brien is a fan. And with that being said, and kind of that background, I think that he gets utilized a lot more than he did in Miami. It seems like he was a guy that just like had a ton of talent, but he just wasn't being utilized properly. And if the Patriots have one thing that they're pretty good at, that's using tight ends to their strength, utilizing tight ends properly, except Juju Smith. But Hunter Henry saw an increase in value when he went to New England, which I feel like a lot of people weren't expecting. So I see a similar trend with Gesicki moving to New England that we saw with Hunter Henry as well.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts?
I like him. He's an athletic tight end that wasn't really used properly in the past couple of years with Dolphins. He had a couple, I think his rookie or second year, he did pretty well, put up like 800 yards and things like that. So it'd be nice to see him return to kind of that kind of stature with the Patriots. Bill O'Brien does like him, and so we'll see if he gets a little more usage and can kind of return to those numbers. I don't think he's going to be anywhere like the Kelsey, Andrews, Hawkinson level, but he might be someone that's really steady and maybe like low end wide receiver or tight end one number, like top 12-ish, kind of there ending up next season.
Yeah, I could see that too, just based on the volume and the talent that he has shown that he has. He's one of those guys that can make some acrobatic catches, big bodied guy for the red zone too. Yeah. And then the last but not least, older veteran guy getting traded. This one kind of was a weird trade for me. Darren Waller to the New York Giants. I guess I'll go with this one. I think this is a downgrade in value. We saw Evan Ingram just like not do anything for the Giants with Daniel Jones for, 3 seasons. He goes 1 year with Trevor Lawrence and has a career year. Obviously, Trevor Lawrence is better than Daniel Jones, but I really don't see Daniel Jones being a better, passer than what he would have had with the Raiders, or what he did have with the Raiders with Derek Carr and what would have been Jimmy Garoppolo. I feel like Daniel Jones is just one of those dual threat quarterbacks that, has pretty good value based on his ability to be a pretty good runner. So I don't really foresee Darren Waller being considered a weekly start like he was like maybe a couple of years ago. What are your thoughts?
I've actually come around. I was kind of in the same camp with you, but when I was starting to look at who's catching balls in the Giants team, you have a couple older veterans. I think Slayton came back and Sterling Shepard came back, but none of those guys really excite me. I think when Darren Waller is kind of healthy, if he's healthy, he can really be kind of that number one target. And even Daniel Jones, he still threw a couple balls to Daniel Bellinger, rookie, tight end that wasn't that great, but he was still throwing in the ball. I think if Darren Waller is in a place and he gets his mind right and stays healthy, he could be a dominant target. I think he has pretty good high upside ability to finish there as one of the top pass catchers. I do like him a little bit more there. I think what I've heard about the reason for leaving the Raiders was just a bad fit with the management, with the coaching. There was some story about when he was off on bye, he just took off without saying anything. He was like, "Peace out, guys, I'm out." I mean, I think it's bye week, so you're allowed to do that, but it kind of really showed like he was really disconnecting from the team, and there's people that created a rift, and I think that's why they just shipped him out for so cheap. I like the landing spot in the Giants just because there's not many other talented pass catchers there. There's good ceiling there, but again, the question is he going to be healthy enough? Can he stay healthy? He is a little older now, so maybe he has one or 2 year good years, if he's healthy. I'm not really excited by him just because it may be a 2 year window, but I want someone younger in terms of my dynasty teams that can kind of maybe do what he's able to do.
Yeah, and I'll give Daniel Jones the benefit of the doubt. That dude has gone now 4 years without a good wide receiving core. So kudos to him for keeping his job for this long. And he had his best year, mostly because of Brian Daboll being the coach of the year. I believe is what he got that. And well deserved. He really utilized Daniel Jones to his strengths. Now they got to surround him with some weapons. Should be interesting to see what he could do with maybe a true wide receiver one on his team, or at least some decent number 2 wide receiver options. So Darren Waller could be a target monster, though. I do agree with that. And that's going to be it for today's show. Obviously, we don't have a ton of live viewers yet. We're still not even to draft day. We still got 3 weeks till that. But I believe next week we're going back to what we were going on, which was ranking dynasty assets, and I think we're at quarterbacks next week, if I'm not mistaken. So guys, tune in next week. Make sure you guys like and subscribe. You'll get notified every time we go live. There's like 3 or 4 weekly live shows here on RotoHeat. So get in there, get on the Facebook page, ask questions, anything like that. And Demo and I will see you next week. Thank you.
Good. Thank you, guys. See you, Bryce.
See ya.